Yeah, we're going to have baseball this week, whether anybody likes it or not, and I cannot wait to watch. And I also have been looking forward all day to talking to this guy on the Davini Equipment phone line, Davini Equipment in Madison and in Jackson, your Kubota dealer, because I found this historical nugget, and I tweeted it out this morning. On this day, July the 21st, exactly 30 years ago in 1990, Ben McDonald, number one pick of the Orioles, made his first start in the major leagues for the Orioles. And on this day, in that first start, he goes complete game shutout of the White Sox, a 2-0 win. It was the first shutout in an American League debut in 15 years at that time. What a way to say hello. And he's on your radio right now. The Real Ben McDonald on Twitter and the Real Ben McDonald on the phone. Ben, how are you, sir? Hope you're doing well.
I remember the game. It's just hard for me to believe that 3-0, that was really 30 years ago. I don't know where time has gone, but it went by in a hurry. But yeah, you always, there's a lot of firsts in baseball, and you always remember your first appearance, and of course you always remember your first big league start, and I do remember that. I can't believe it's been that long, but that was some good times for sure.
For sure. Well, and I wonder that, I hear stories all the time about guys who played in the pros that can remember every pitch and every game and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if you're that way, or does this one stand out more to you because it was that first one?
No, I do some work for Baltimore and do a lot of the Oriole games. As a matter of fact, I'm leaving tomorrow to head to Baltimore to start calling some ball games. But I work side by side at times with Jim Palmer, and of course Jim Palmer, the Hall of Famer, much older than I am, but he, they didn't have computers back then and iPhones and all the scouting reports. So they had those photographic memories. And Jim could almost tell you. I love talking baseball with him because he can tell you just about every pitch he ever threw to every hitter in every situation. I cannot remember that. I mean, there are things in my career that I do remember a lot of it, along the way, especially when somebody brings up a story that it'll kind of pop in my mind at times, But I do remember this start because it was my first one, but I can't recall all 200 and something starts I had in the big leagues and all the thousand innings I threw and all that kind of stuff. I just can't recall all of it, but there's a lot of good stuff that I do remember.
Okay, and I want to go back to it. So it was on this day in 1990, it was your first start, but you had been on the mound the previous year, just not in a starting role. Is that right, with Baltimore?
Well, in '89, the previous year is the year that I got drafted, right? I played at LSU my junior year, and I signed, got drafted in June of '89 after the College World Series, and signed in August, and then, of course, got a September call-up. So I was one of the very fortunate ones, only spent like 10 days in the minor league system, and I got called up in the month of September as a 21-year-old, and really was just kind of in a mop-up role because the Orioles were actually in a pennant race at the time and were fighting the Blue Jays down the stretch, and so they already had their starting rotation. So I came in just out of the bullpen 5 or 6 times during the month of September, so I really didn't get any starts in. And then I was named opening day starter in 90, and then I had an oblique issue in spring training where I blew out an oblique and just took a little bit of time to come back and work my way back. And so my first start actually did not come to about halfway through the season in July. 30 years ago today was actually my first start.
All right, so 30 years ago today, it was against the White Sox, and it's a complete game shutout, 2-0 win for the good guys. And, outside of a no-hitter, Ben, that's about as good as it gets, man, in a debut first start.
Yeah, I tell you, never saw that coming. And on top of that, only threw 85 pitches.
Right.
And that's what I remember about it, 55 strikes and 85 total pitches, which is just unheard of, obviously less than 10 pitches per inning. But, I think the scout report was out on me a little bit. I threw a lot of strikes in my career, and the White Sox had that approach. They were going to be aggressive, and I just made a lot of good first pitch pitches. I didn't strike out but 5, but didn't walk but 1 batter along the way. And that was a really good lineup. That was a good team. That was a team that was 20 games over 500 when we played them that day. And then I remember, of course, Robin Ventura, who I played on the Olympic team with the year before. And, of course, there was a young Sammy Sosa hitting down towards the bottom of that lineup, and Ron Kittle and some other guys. And, of course, Blackjack McDowell, the pitcher, was a very good pitcher and had an outstanding big league career. Me and him battled all the way through. I think he threw a complete game as well, So you don't forget things like that. And I didn't know how to pitch at the time. I always tell people the story that Skip Bertman called every pitch I ever threw over at LSU. And so I never really thought about how to set up hitters and why I'm throwing certain pitches in certain situations. Then all of a sudden you get to the big leagues, a 21-year-old kid, and they give you the ball and say, go call your own game against the best hitters in the world. And so that was a challenge for me. But I had a veteran catcher, a guy by the name of Bob Melvin, who's been a big league manager for a while now, still managing today. And Bo Mel was really good about, hey, look, because I told him before the game, I said, Bo Mel, I got no idea. I don't know any of these hitters other than Ventura. I have no idea. He said, look, you just follow my lead. Wherever I put the finger, that's where you throw it. Whatever I put down, you throw that pitch, and we're going to be okay. And it was really, that's how simple he kept it for me. And, of course, I never shook a pitch off the whole game, and 85 pitches later, we'd thrown a complete game shutout.
A complete game. You go complete game. McDowell goes complete game for the White Sox. A pitcher's duel on this day 30 years ago. It was your first start. And I'm looking at that lineup that you faced, Ben, against the White Sox. You had you had Ozzie Guillen in the 9-hole. You struck him out once. You had Sammy Sosa, a young Sammy Sosa, in the 8-hole. You strike him out once. Their cleanup, the DH, Dan Pasqua, you strike him out twice. And it's this guy, this Ron Kittle guy who got the bat on the ball twice against you. It's funny how, our historical perspective of some of these players, and then we look at a box score and we're like, well, how'd he get a hit? We don't realize it 30 years later. It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, Ron Kittle, if you go follow his career, he had a really good career with the White Sox, had a lot of home runs, big power hitter. He'd never hit for a great average, but for that particular day, he had my number as far as base hits go, and Robert Ventura had a really good big league career. I think he played 13 or 14 years. He was from the left side, obviously, and I think he got a base hit that game as well, So it's weird. As you play, there's certain teams, no matter what the names on the back of the jersey you are, that they have that particular day, you always pitch well against, and there's certain guys, no matter who they play for, that always hit you well, and Kittle seemed to give me trouble in my career no matter when I faced him. He was just one of those guys. But, man, I'm just so excited baseball's getting cranked up. And I'll call the first game in Baltimore on Friday night. The Orioles tip it off against the Red Sox. And so I'm just glad baseball's back, man. I think that we as people need sports back in the mix, and nothing screams normalcy, a little bit of normalcy in our world, than having baseball back. So I'm looking forward to hopefully a full 60-game schedule. In the Major League season. It's going to be fun.
No doubt about it. Ben McDonald on your radio right now. Y'all follow him on Twitter if you don't already. He is at Real Ben McDonald, former #1 pick out of LSU. Now the best baseball analyst that ESPN has, pro or college, does a lot of our games here in Starkville and Oxford and in the SEC, and we're lucky for that. So you mentioned you're about to fly up to Baltimore. I have to ask you, Ben, is there any apprehension at all for you with this coronavirus of getting on an airplane and traveling?
There's a little bit for me, but I look at the science and the numbers and my age. I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. I'm gonna wear my mask. I'm a big mask guy. When mask needs to be worn, I wear one. I'm gonna wear my mask on the airplane. I'm gonna wear it in the airport. And I'll be living in a hotel and I'm going to do 51 out of the 60 games, so I'm going to be busy. So I'll be spending the majority of my time in Baltimore. So, yeah, there's some concern, but, I'm just a good old country boy like a lot of folks are around there. And I just look at it as a common sense kind of deal,
Sure, yeah.
You wash your hands, you social distance, you wear your mask, you pay attention to what you're doing. And hopefully, good Lord willing, everything's going to be okay,
Sure.
And that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. I think it's a very serious thing, but also feel like that we're going to get through this, and while it's horrible right now, it's been some bad times in this world. I get all that, but I guess I always look at things as the glass half full rather than half empty, and I'm looking at it as, hey, we're going to get to the other side of this. We're going to get our economy going again, and everything's going to be okay, and I'm willing to go take a risk to watch baseball. But I will say this, man, the Orioles, and talking to them, they've done a wonderful job. I feel very safe about where I'm going, and once I get to the ballpark, and they've taken the press box and they made a cubicle out of it. So I have one half of the cubicle with a glass partition in the middle to my play-by-play guy. So once we get into our booth, then we can take our mask off, and that booth will be just my booth only. I'll be the only one in there, and we're going to be COVID tested once a week. The broadcasters are. And so I feel pretty safe in the environment that I'm going to. I think Major League Baseball has done a wonderful job with the players. I think they're getting tested every other day. So I feel pretty confident about where we're going. Of course, there's not going to be any fans and not many people at the ballpark, but that's just part of what we're dealing with right now. And that's okay. And I'm hoping that, maybe September rolls around, this thing gets better and we get a few fans back to the ballpark,
Sure.
And so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be different with no fans in the stands, but it is what it is, and we got to go do our job. And at the end of the day, it's watching big league baseball and talking about it. So that's going to be hard to beat.
Sure. Ben, when you mentioned wearing a mask, I was thinking, you have that mask on, you might be able to kind of go incognito, and fly under the radar. The problem is there aren't too many 6'7" guys wearing Orioles gear walking around, So,
That's true. I got me some good friend of mine is Phil Jordan, who of course owns Realtree Camouflage and plays football at Ole Miss, and way back when Mr. Manning was there, and Archie was quarterbacking, and so Bill and them sent me some camo masks. So I'm going to have my camo mask on when I'm walking around Baltimore, my Realtree camo anyway, so maybe they won't see me coming anyway.
That's good. Ben McDonald on your radio. Hey, so you mentioned the Orioles. You obviously follow them closely. You call their games. Man, they went SEC heavy in that abbreviated draft a month ago, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and Mike Elias is obviously the new GM for the Orioles, and in his second full year. And Mike's background, he was a scout first, and of course he was with the Houston Astros as assistant GM when the Astros kind of rebuilt the Astros years ago when they lost 100 games, a couple years in a row, lost 97 the third year. The fifth year of that rebuild, they won the World Series we all know about. Now, it was somewhat tainted, and we could talk about that on a different show,
Sure,
with all the sign-stealing stuff that went on. But still, they put all the pieces of that puzzle together, and Mike Elias was a big part of that with the drafts and everything. So he's kind of taking the same approach over here, and the Orioles are in a rebuild. But, he's a big SEC guy, and I talk to Mike all the time, and because I do SEC baseball, he's always picking my brain about what I think of certain people and certain players and the ones that I see. But he understands the SEC is, just like in football, it's the number one conference in the entire country when it comes to baseball, just like football is. And the majority of the better players are in the SEC. And that's not taking anything away from the other conferences around the country, because there's some really good players in other conferences as well. But if you take it as a whole and you take all 14 teams in the SEC in baseball, there's some outstanding talent that proves itself every year, and so he really likes the SEC guys because he feels like they play at the highest, collegiate and amateur level in the country. And when they prove themselves at that level, then he feels like those guys are worthy of being drafted. And you mentioned SEC heavy Jordan Westberg, with Mississippi State, I think has a huge upside. And you talk about Heston Kirsten, who was the number one pick by the Orioles, I think second overall. The big outfielder from Arkansas that had an outstanding, couple of 2.5 years there at Arkansas. So it was heavy. Don't forget Savidio over at Ole Miss too. I think is a really spark plug and utility type player at the big league level. So yeah, he went heavy, but it was good to see it. I think the Orioles hit pretty straight on with those picks. I think all three of those players are outstanding players and going to be good professionals as well.
No doubt. Kirstead out of Arkansas, their first pick, and then later in that first round, Westberg, who was a shortstop at Mississippi State, a 6'3" kid who was about the fastest kid on the field every time they played. This big athlete. Football coaches drooling, wish he'd chosen football, but great athlete. Do you think he's a shortstop in the big leagues?
Every scouting report that I've seen says he's good enough to stick on the left side of that infield, which meaning shortstop or third base, I even called Jake Mangum because I know Jake a little bit over the years, just a great kid over Mississippi State. And of course, he's beginning his pro career as well. Not much going on this summer for him, but I called him up and said, look, give me your honest feel on Jake Mangum, on Westberg. And he said, Ben, I'm going to tell you, every day this kid steps onto a baseball field, he's the most athletic and most talented player on the field. And I said, wow. I said, that's a big statement, Jake. He said, I mean it. He said, I truly mean it. He said, when he gets a little bit better at pitch selection and identifying the strike zone, not swinging at the bad pitches, which a lot of hitters struggle with when they're younger. He said, Ben, he's going to be a name that you're going to hear about for a long time. And so for Jake to say that, and I said, listen, do you think he can stick at shortstop at the professional level? He said, I absolutely. He said he's got a good arm. He's got a good glove. He said he makes some errors, but he said you hit him 100 ground balls a day, maybe more, then he's going to be one of those everyday players. And I even talked to Mike Elias about him too. He said, Ben, we really like him. He said, we think he's got the biggest upside of anybody we've ever drafted. We think that much of him.
Wow. That is incredible. Well, and he showed flashes, I saw him more than once choke up on that bat with 2 strikes and send one out of center field slightly oppo at Duty Noble. He'd do some stuff that would flash and you'd go, wow.
Yeah.
I guess, is it a thing like with him and any prospect, it's just simply a matter of developing consistency in everything you do?
I think so. That's what ultimately defines your professional career, and the guys that can show consistency and grow over time are the ones that eventually make it to the big league level and stay there,
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. It's always about adjustment at the big league level, and can you adjust back? But yeah, you can go down the list. There's a lot of young hitters that struggled and were swing and miss a lot and miss when they swung a good bit. But Westberg's got things you can't teach. As you mentioned, he can run. Mangum says he's the strongest guy in the field too. You can't teach that. The ball really comes off the bat. He's got a big league arm. All things you can't teach. Now, with enough reps, and you take a young man and you go put him in a minor league system and you let him play 100 minor league games a year, and he gets 450 at bats for a couple of years, I think he starts to figure it out a little bit, and that's what most of them do.
Sure.
And so I think for him it's just going to be reps. Get enough reps where he can identify pitches better out of pitchers' hands. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to play, in Baltimore, and he's going to play for a while.
Ben, I can't thank you enough for a little time ahead of some travel for you. Can't wait to listen to you on my phone and the Orioles games. Thank you so much. And look, in the grand scheme, 30 years ago really wasn't that long ago. That's just the truth.
I appreciate you saying that. Seems like a blink of an eye ago to me. It just doesn't sound right when you say 30. But always enjoy talking to you. We'll do it again maybe halfway through the big league season, and we'll see how things are going.
Great. Sounds good. Travel safely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. You too. You too. That's Ben McDonald, former number 1 pick. Man, I'm telling you, there are some people that just have a little it about them in their arena. And can you seriously, if you're a baseball fan, how many hours of conversation with Ben McDonald would you listen to? You just listen to hours and hours and hours. The guy just has an it when talking about baseball. And, buddy, he had it as a player, too. Like I said, 1989, the first overall pick for the Orioles, up in September in a playoff run. Made his first start in the major leagues for the Orioles on this day 30 years ago, 1990, and shut out the Chicago White Sox 2-0 in a complete game win in his debut. I enjoyed that, and I hope you did too. Still a little ways to go with you here this afternoon in the Farm Bureau studio. Stick around.